Alright, support for 8.2. So the first one they wanted me to factor. So I got two terms sitting here, separated by the plus. So if you notice, both of them have a common factor of y minus 3. So what you do is factor out that y minus 3, and then you set up another set of parentheses. So what we do, once we take the a times y minus 3, divide out the y minus 3, all that's left is the a, plus z times y minus 3, divide out that y minus 3, and you have z. So basically, what's inside the parentheses makes up one set factor. What's outside the parentheses makes up the other factor. Alright, so another one of those, 5x times 3x minus 5 minus 2 times 3x minus 5. Alright, so same thing. These parentheses match up for these two terms, so we're going to factor out the 3x minus 5. So if I take out the 3x minus 5 from both of those, second parentheses gets everything else, which is the 5x minus 2. So you're basically dividing both of these terms by 3x minus 5, which is canceling out each of them's 3x minus 5, leaving the 5x minus 2 for the second parentheses. Alright, so the reason we've done that is so we can do problems like this third one. I got an x to the third plus 4x squared minus 5x minus 20. This is factored by grouping. So I group the first two terms together, then I group the second two terms together, and I find GCFs from each term. Now the second GCF has to have the same sign as that third term, so I'm going to make this a negative. You don't have to put a sign in front of the first GCF unless you have a negative you're factoring out. Alright, so let's look at the first two terms, x3, 4x squared. The most that they have in common is an x squared. So we write the x squared followed by parentheses. And what's going to go into parentheses is what we get from dividing both of these by x squared. So x3 divided by x squared leaves an x, plus 4x squared divided by x squared leaves a 4. So it's always both terms divided by the GCF. Second term was negative. GCF was negative, so I'm going to write that negative there. And then 5x and 20, what they have in common is a 5. So we're going to factor out that negative 5 and then put parentheses. Negative 5x divided by negative 5 leaves a positive x. Negative 20 divided by that negative 5 leaves a positive 4. So notice at this point, these parentheses match up, so it's the same situation as we had above. So I'm going to factor out the GCF, which is the x plus 4. And in the second parentheses, I put everything else, which is what I get by dividing both of these terms up here by the x plus 4s. So I'm going to get an x squared and then a minus 5. Now, since that's just an x, that factor is done. This has an x squared minus 5. I would go further if the 5 was a perfect square, like a 4 or a 9 or a 16 or a 25. But since it's a 5, it don't have a square root, so we stop there. Alright, number 4 is 12w to the third plus 36w minus 15w squared minus 45. Oh, those are big numbers, but if you notice, each one of these numbers will divide by 3, so I'm going to factor out a GCF of 3 from all four of these numbers. So 12 divided by 3 leaves me a 4w to the third, plus 36 divided by 3 leaves me a 12w, minus 15 divided by 3 leaves me a 5w squared, minus 45 divided by 3 is a 15. Now, since that's 4 terms, I'm going to factor the inside of these parentheses by grouping, and I'm going to keep bringing down my 3 each time. Okay? So, remember, I'm going to factor the first 2 terms and the second 2 terms. So, we're going to factor out GCFs from each. Second GCF is going to be negative, since the third term is negative. Alright, let's see. 4w to the third plus 12w. Both of them have a 4 in them, and at least 1w. So you can't put more w's than the smallest term, okay? So if I bring down my 3, and then factor out that 4w, so they're going to be in parentheses in the 4w, right? Followed by its parentheses. So remember, this 3 is just getting brought down each time, so I'm putting extra parentheses. So 4w to the third divided by 4w leaves me a w squared, plus 12w divided by 3w leaves me a 3. 12w divided by 4w, leaves me a 3. Alright, second GCF was negative 5w squared, 15, both have a 5, so I'm going to bring down that negative 5 and then put parentheses. Negative 5w squared divided by negative 5 leaves me a w squared. Negative 15 divided by negative 5 leaves me a positive 3. So once again, if you notice, the parentheses match up, so bring down this 3. And then we're going to write parentheses because they have a GCF of w squared plus 3. And at this point, I'm dropping the main parentheses that I was using on these because I'm starting to write everything as factors. Alright, then the last parenthesis, since I factored out the w squared plus 3's into the first factor, all what's left is a 4w minus 5. So this problem was like number 3, except we had to keep dragging our GCF down. Now the final answer, they want everything in MATLAB. Alright, let's go to number 5 and start solving. V squared plus 3v equals 0. Alright, so since that's got an exponent higher than 1, I got everything on 0 equal to everything on one side equal to 0. So I'm going to solve this by factoring. And both of these do have a common factor, so I'm going to factor out their GCF, which they both have is a v. So I'm going to write the v followed by parentheses, all equal to 0. Alright, here we go. V squared divided by v leaves me a v, plus 3v divided by v leaves me a 3. Alright, now since this is an equation, we got to set each of these factors equal to 0 to solve it. So I set v equals 0, and that one's done, which means one answer will be 0. And then we set v plus 3 equal to 0. Now we want to solve this, and so to get the v by itself and solve it, I've got to subtract 3 from both sides, and I get v is a negative 3. So my two answers are 0 and negative 3. I got two answers since my highest exponent was a 2. Alright, y'all, 6 is a 2w to the third minus 8w squared equals 42w. Alright, so since I got exponents higher than 1, I'm going to get everything on one side equal to 0. So to move the 42w, I need to subtract it from both sides. So that's going to give me a 0 on that right side. Now, none of these are like terms, so I'm just going to put them in order. 2w to the third minus 8w squared minus 42w. Alright, notice the first thing I notice is that all these have a GCF in them. All these will divide by 2, so I'm going to pull out a 2. And all these will divide by at least one w, so I'm going to pull out a 2w. And then put everything in parentheses equal to my 0 still. Alright, so all three of these divide by 2w. So 2w to the third divided by 2w leaves you a w squared. Negative 8w squared divided by 2w leaves you a negative 4w. So I'm just subtracting exponents each time. Negative 42w divided by 2w equals a negative 21. Those w's canceled since you only had one to start with. Now what you got to worry about is this part inside these parentheses factors further. So bring down that 2w. We're going to factor that into parentheses, and it's all going to be equal to 0. Since there's not a number in front of the w squared, you can always go right to the parentheses, okay? That means a w in a w. That's negative 21, so one's positive, one's negative. Alright, since those are unlike signs, you want factors of 21. That'll subtract and give you 4. So you got 1 and 21, 3 and 7. The ones that give me 4 are 3 and 7. the larger number 7 has to have the same sign as the middle, which is negative. So that means the 7 is negative and the 3 is positive. So that's what I usually do just to figure out my signs real quick. Alright, since I cannot factor these any further, that's a single W, a W, and a W. I set all 3 of them equal to 0 to get my 3 answers. Alright, so the first one I divide by 2. And I get W equals 0. So once again, once you factor out that GCF of a variable, just like I did in number 5, those GCFs always give me 0 for those answers, okay? Alright, to get the other 2 answers, I'm going to subtract 3 to get this W by itself. On the last one, I'm going to add 7 to get that W by itself. So my 3 answers are 0, negative 3, positive 7. Alright, let me squeeze 7 over here. So I got 7 s to the third equals 28 s. Alright, so I got higher exponents than 1, so I'm going to subtract that 28s to get it on that side. Now once again, these aren't like terms, so I'm just going to put them in order. 7s to the third minus 28s equals 0. Alright, so notice these have a GCF in them again. And the GCF, they both have a 7 and an S. So we're bringing down the 7s, and in parentheses, put what's left. 7s to the third divided by 7s leaves you a s squared, minus 28s divided by 7s is a 4. Once again, the s is canceled. Alright, now a while ago I couldn't factor that x squared minus 5 further, but I can factor the s squared minus 4 further because 4 is a perfect square. So I bring down the 7s, and I'm going to factor that into parentheses, all equal to my 0. Alright, so let's see. S squared means I got an S and an S. Last sign's negative, so one's positive, one's negative. And then there's no number in the middle, so it's 0 since there's no S term. 0. So find me factors of 4 that'll subtract and give me 0. Well, 1 and 4 don't do it, but 2 and 2 do it. So plus 2 and minus 2. They multiply to get negative 4, they add to get that 0. Alright, then what cannot factor no further, so we'll set all 3 of these equal to 0 to get our answers. And remember, that variable right here came out as a GCF, so when you divide by 7, you still get S is 0. Once again, the GCF gave us 0. Alright, this one, to get the S by itself, I subtract 2, so I get S is a negative 2. Now, all I'm doing on these factors is changing the signs of each one of them by setting them equal to 0, right? So that you notice all these factors always have, all these answers always have different signs than the factors. Alright, so number 8 is factor, so I got a b to the third minus 25b squared minus 9b plus 225. Alright, none of these have a GCF in them, so since there's 4 terms, I'm going to factor by grouping the first 2 and the second 2. Find me a GCF of each one, and the second GCF has to be negative, like that third sign. Alright, so the first 2, b3, 25b squared, they both have a b squared in them. So I'm going to factor out the b squared and put what's left. b3 divided by b squared leaves me a b minus 25b squared divided by b squared leaves me 25. Alright, now the second GCF was negative, so I'm going to put that negative there. 9b and 225 both have a 9 in them, so we're going to factor out that negative 9. Negative 9b divided by negative 9 leaves me a b. Positive 225 divided by negative 9 leaves me a negative 25. So notice, once again, the parentheses matched up, so they become my last GCF, b minus 25. And then in the second parentheses, I put what's left, which is the b squared minus 9. Oh, and y'all look at that. I got a b squared minus 9. I'm not worried about the b minus 25 because that b don't factor no further. But this b squared will factor further, and that 9 is a perfect square. So I got to work on the second parentheses. Since that's perfect squares, I'm going to write it as 2 parentheses, a b and a b. Since that's negative, one's positive, one's negative. And basically, what's the square root of 9? It is 3. So I'll put a 3 and a 3. So you want a number back here that's a perfect square for those to go any further. Alright, I might can do this number 9 real quick. Alright, so let's see what I got. I got an r to the third minus rt squared minus 9t squared. 9r squared plus 9t squared. Alright, so I'm in order now. So let me write that. R3 minus RT squared minus 9R squared plus 9T squared. So 4 terms, so I'm going to factor by grouping. GCF of the first 2 terms is just a R. And then, in parentheses, R3 divided by R leaves you R squared minus RT squared divided by R leaves you a T squared. Now the second GCF over here is going to be negative, and both of these have a 9 in them, and y'all, that's it. So let's divide both of these by a negative 9. So negative 9R squared divided by negative 9 leaves me a R squared. 9t squared divided by negative 9 leaves me a negative t squared. So notice, I got parentheses that match up, so I'm going to bring down to r squared minus t squared. Second parentheses is everything else, which is the r minus 9. Alright, so the r minus 9 will not go further because that's a single r. But the first one is perfect squares, so we're going to make that 2 parentheses, and then at the end will still be the r minus 9. Alright, so to get a r squared, that's going to be a r and a r. Last one's negative, so that's 1 positive and 1's negative. And the only way to get that t squared is a t and a t. Alright, y'all, let's see. That's putting us about 17 and a half, so that's all the time we got today, so good luck.